I want to show you a couple of things that can mess up rock strata. So we're going to look at a couple of things. Some words that I'm going to teach you about today are going to be faulting, tilting, warping, erosion you kind of know a little bit about, and there's also going to be intrusions I'm going to teach you about today. So this is going to be important for being able to do a homework assignment, which is going to be this, the relative dating puzzle. So I want to teach you how to do that. All right, so first off, what we'll be doing is we'll be doing some puzzles in which you'll see a diagram, kind of like you see right up here, and you're going to have to figure out what order did this all happen. Because on the diagrams, you're going to see different letters on there, like here's letter E, H, G, D, this is letter A. So there's going to be different things that have happened, and you've got to figure out what's the order, what happened first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way. So there's some couple things I want to teach you, though, that can mess up rock layers. Because when we took notes, there were 6 things we said that can affect the way rock strata forms. We learned about original horizontality, that rock strata layers are going to start out originally horizontal. The sediments are laid down flat. We also learned about cross-cutting relationships, that anything that cuts through a layer is going to be younger than the things that cut through. So let's look at a couple of things that can affect rock layer formation. So here is one picture. This one's pretty easy, and we'll do this one a little bit later, but I want to point out some things to you. Let's say that we had this, okay? This rock layer's going on right here. You're going to notice something weird here, and that's this A. A is something called an intrusion, and an intrusion is an example of a cross-cutting relationship. An intrusion is when magma from deep in the earth finds a weak spot in rock layers, and it actually intrudes inside of those rock layers. And so this is a cross-cutting relationship. If you see this, any intrusion is going to be younger than the rock layers it cuts through. Okay, so keep that in mind as we're doing this. So that's an intrusion. You're also going to see on puzzle 2, A is an intrusion, so is B. This actually had 2 intrusions. So intrusion is, again, that's that magma comes and melts the rock and cuts through it. Okay? And then we've got something here. If you look at this line, that is called a fault. And a fault, what a fault is that's when we have layers of earth, and what happens is there's a shift. There's a crack and there's a shift, and one shifts up, one shifts down, and that's actually how earthquakes happen. So faults are a thing that can mess with rock layers. They can erase or warp rock layers by shifting. So that's what you see F. This also is a cross-cutting relationship. So if you see something like this, a fault, you know that it's going to be younger than anything else it cuts through. All the other stuff had to be there first in order for it to get cut through. It's a cross-cutting relationship. All right, as we go through different puzzles, you're going to see, again, another fault line here. You're going to see intrusions. The other thing I haven't showed you yet, and let's kind of keep going through some of these puzzles, is I haven't showed you about warping yet. Now, warping is the idea that layers, they get twisted or bent. They get twisted or bent. Because we learned that originally layers start out as being flat, right? That they start out being flat, they be horizontal. So what happens is sometimes there's pressures in the earth that causes those layers to bend, and you can see that we had some warping go on in this diagram here. There's a bending of layers, okay? So that's going to be another one, warping. In addition to warping, I'm going to try to find something that shows tilting, and hopefully that'll make sense. Okay, here's a good example. So in addition to intrusions and faults, there's also something called tilting. Now, if you look at these layers here in puzzle 3, you're going to notice that those layers are no longer flat. Instead, they've tilted. So if you look at these layers here, they're all at an angle. Now, we know that sometimes what happens in the process of the earth is sometimes layers go from being flat to being tilted because of a shifting of the earth, a shifting of the ground and shifting of those layers. So that's called tilt. Okay? Another thing is we've talked about the warping, talked about faulting, intrusions. There's also going to be erosion. Now you already know that erosion is going to be the idea that it takes rocks or layers of rocks and it wears them away. Wind, water, ice, or other things wear that away. So in some of these, you probably already noticed that there's some erosion here. If you look at B, we see there's erosion right there. No longer is there a nice flat surface. It's curved. Let's see if we can find some other good examples of erosion. Actually, let me back up because I think we got a good example here. Now, if you look at this diagram, you'll notice that there's a dip down here. what's happened is there's been erosion. Remember, erosion is also something that can change rock layers because it starts to wear away at those layers, leaving a surface that isn't originally flat. So you see that there. Also, here's a good example of erosion here. Notice the curved surface, it's been worn away. So those are some things I wanted to teach you about. So things that can change rock layers are, again, one, it can be an intrusion, like we talked about, intrusion where magma comes up from the bottom of the earth. It can also be faulting, so where there is a shift or break in the earth, okay? There can be warping, where there's a bending of those layers. And there can also be erosion, like we saw here, okay? So those are some things that can change Earth's layers, and that's going to help you to know a little bit about it. If anything's eroded through, if there's an intrusion or a fault line, we know that those processes are younger than what they cut through. They're younger because those things had to be there first. As far as the timeline on how fast those things happen, that's good to know. One, faulting can happen really quickly, and a lot of energy is released. That's how we get earthquakes sometimes, or tsunamis, is the shifting of ground. As far as intrusions, sometimes those can happen more quickly, but sometimes those can take time. Erosion is going to be one that takes a very long time. Warping is going to also be one that takes a long time, usually, because the forces of the earth gradually change those layers, from my understanding. So anyway, that's a little bit about things that can change layers, and that's going to help you in what we're going to be doing next.